Hello and welcome to Inside the Newsroom. I'm Joey Taylor. Inside the Newsroom is a show where we take a look at the important and trending stories happening in KELOLAND and bring in our newsroom staff members to talk about these stories. Now, they're the same ones you see every day on air and on our website, KELOLAND.com. Let's go ahead and get started now. Sioux Falls voters will elect a new mayor in June, and the person they pick will hold office when Smithfield Foods relocates away from the city center. So we're bringing in Dan Santella now because we wanted to find out what these 6 candidates for office have to say about Smithfield's plans. Now, you're working on speaking with all of the candidates right now, and we're not running your full stories because they're kind of running in segments throughout the week. But just talk to me, Dan, about the importance of hearing from all of these candidates.
Well, I mean, these are the people pursuing a spot on the ballot. One person, Joe Batchelor, has already qualified for the ballot. You need 200 signatures by a certain date. Pardon, it escapes me right now. But you just need the 200 signatures to make the ballot. We have 6 candidates, and since voters, will have these options come June, we want to hear from all of them. And so yesterday we started out, I interviewed Joe Batchelor in person. Jamie Smith was in Pierre, so our colleague Bob Mercer interviewed him. So we had him as well. So those two. Coming up shortly here, we'll talk with David Zakaitis in person. And then Bob will interview Christine Erickson in Pierre. So that takes care of 4 of the 6. Bob was also going to talk with Greg Jameson today in Pierre. And through the magic of the internet, he sends us that interview back to Sioux Falls. And then I was still looking to talk with Marshall Selberg. I was sending him messages earlier today. So then it'll be Jameson and Selberg for tomorrow's Thursday's story, the 3rd piece featuring 2 candidates. So we have all 6 then.
Perfect. And you kind of beat me to my question right there of, for those who don't know, who are vying for the mayoral seat. So you mentioned all 6 of them. And like I mentioned, we're not airing that story right now. We're hoping to have you back later this week so that way we can get all of their opinions in one story to make it fair. But for you, what's it like organizing and putting it all together for the viewers to make sure, like I mentioned, everything is fair?
Well, you don't want to put out a story that has 3 long quotes from one candidate and 1 brief quote from another, right? And while these races are nonpartisan, we still want to give equal time to everyone. So, like even yesterday, planning the story that aired and published at 5 o'clock, I measured time in our video editing software, how much Batchelor got and how much Smith got. So much so that there's only a few seconds difference. They each on air got 2 for the 5 o'clock piece, got 2 quotes and added up together. I forget what the quantity was, but it was more or less equal. At 4 o'clock, they each got a quote that was relatively the same length. And then the same thing for the 10 o'clock as well. So I'm literally measuring the time in Premiere, our video processing software program, to make sure that everyone's getting roughly the same amount of time. If one person gets 19 seconds, we don't need 19 seconds for the other one. 16, 17, 18, 20, something in that ballpark. And because of course some people speak more slowly than others. There might be a pause or a couple of knows in there. But it when you're talking politics and you're talking about options that voters have, it's very important to present each candidate with an equal amount of time, especially when they're in the same piece, right? And there's been no rhyme or reason for why I included Smith and Batchelor in the story last night, which is I started reaching out to candidates. This is when they were available. Came to fruition that Batchelor happened to be first, and then Jamie Smith was available and Pierre for Bob to interview and then send that back to us. So that's just kind of how it came to fruition. There's no rhyme or reason why we're doing those candidates first or certain candidates last.
Right. Well, and it makes sense to me, but I know sometimes the viewers don't always understand the rhyme and reason behind things, which is why we have Inside the Newsroom to kind of give them that look at things. And that's, folks, also why we're choosing not to air the 2 candidates' story when we can't air the other 4 right now. So that's why we're hoping to bring Dan back later this week after all 6 have aired. Dan, talk to me a little bit about how this race is shaping up for these candidates, though. I know you mentioned a little bit that one candidate did have the signatures, but talk to me about how it's shaping up.
Yeah, and that just happened to be Batchelor qualified for the ballot first. She just need 200, which is, especially when compared to what you need to run for U.S. House, U.S. Senate, or governor in South Dakota if you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. 200 signatures is a lot fewer. For example, to run as an independent for one of those positions statewide, U.S. House, U.S. Senate, U.S. governor, you need 3,502 signatures. It's a fair amount, right? Just 200. Okay, so you got to get those. Bachelor's already had secured his, so he's officially going to be on the ballot. But the other 5 will just need to secure those 500 in a timely fashion and submit them, and they get approved for the ballot. Something that is very interesting that I had forgotten until doing my story yesterday is, okay, so the mayoral race is on June 2nd, at which point we have a lot of other races going on in South Dakota politics, right? But someone, in order to avoid a runoff on June 23rd, 3 weeks later, will need to get a majority of the votes. So 50 plus 1, right? Okay. That could be quite the tall ask for anyone in a race where we could, assume they all get 200 signatures. We could have 6 names on the ballot, so it could be really hard. And there's some names in there that are fairly well known in political circles in Sioux Falls, who have held office before or have higher name recognition. So indeed, it looks likely right now that we'll have a runoff on June 23rd. The top 2 from the 2nd would advance to that. So just something to bear in mind that, we also have the possibility of a gubernatorial runoff. But I suppose that's one of those items where, as a newsroom, we'll cross that bridge if and when we get to it.
Perfect. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining us. And folks, make sure you keep your eye on Inside the Newsroom later this week. Like as I have mentioned, we want to bring Dan back for an update after all of the candidates have had their story air. And don't go anywhere because we will be right back after the break. You're watching Inside the Newsroom. You're watching Inside the Newsroom. We're still talking about Smithfield right now. Smithfield CEO Shane Smith said their announcement that the new facility will be state-of-the-art with new technology and a larger capacity for hog processing. Now, Anya Joseph has the details on how the new plant will operate and what the ag community is saying.
Smithfield's move to a new facility promises a future for pork producers and for those that supply them.
South Dakota is known for raising corn and soybean production and stuff, and those are the 2 major feed ingredients that go into feeding livestock and hogs in general. It's good for the whole ag sector in general.
And it doesn't stop at agriculture, as other companies feed off the traffic Smithfield brings in, from retail stores to truck repair shops.
The trickle-down effect of the economics of it, that is huge across the economics of the city of Sioux Falls and the neighboring communities.
Not only from the farm gate all the way through to the consumer. And honestly, investments like this help ensure that South Dakota producers remain competitive, resilient, and really positioned for growth.
Smithfield is owned by the Hong Kong-based WH Group, a major Chinese meat packing business. The ownership brings into question a state law which places restrictions on the ownership of agricultural land from some foreign countries, including China. Smith is more concerned about maintaining the strong partnership.
I think we've learned over the past number of years that just maintaining that supply chain in our state and nation is something that we don't want to take for granted.
All right, and Anya Joseph joins us now. Anya, first, I have to know, you went out to a hog farm yesterday. Talk to me about seeing the pigs.
Honestly, it was really, it was really fun because there were so many pigs. Obviously, I didn't get to go in there because Shane Odegaard, the owner of the Odegaard family farms, told me about the biosecurity that they have for the pigs and how they can easily get sick with just airborne things that, I didn't want to contaminate them because, I eat bacon and pork products. And so, I wouldn't want that for my consumership. So I just felt like that was fun. But I got a glimpse of the pigs, which was nice.
Yeah, I saw that video in there. And talk to me just about how much this new facility is estimated to process.
It's estimated to process about 20,000 hogs a day, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is 28 million a year.
I went in to journalism, not math. So I can't help you if you're wrong. Folks, you can do the math at home. We apologize. But Anya, we heard in your story kind of about the effects and the trickle-down effect and how it's going to benefit people or just specific people. Talk to me just a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was mainly from Shane, who was talking to me about just how it doesn't just stop at, the ag sector. We have, traffic that Smithfield brings in, because I know regionally that there are truck drivers that deliver to Smithfield from Iowa and Minnesota. And so, those truck drivers coming in, they stop at your gas stations. The gas station gets, some money there. And then not to mention if it's cold here and they need to buy a jacket, they go buy a jacket. If they need to go get their truck fixed, they have to go to an auto repair shop. So it's just the trickle down effect of, it doesn't just stop at the agriculture, sector getting money, from delivering the hogs, and, even before that, feeding the livestock, the soybeans that, feed the pigs. So it doesn't just, stop at the hog farms. It kind of funnels down.
Yeah. Well, and we only have a little bit of time left, but I want a quick mention for those who maybe aren't clear on the state law that your story mentioned. I have it pulled up here. It was enrolled in 2024. Talk to me just really quickly about that.
It is just a law that places restrictions on ownership of agricultural land, and it has a list of foreign countries, and China is on there. So kind of rings a few bells whenever you listen to that law, and it just makes you question, is this a good partnership? Because I know that the owner of Smithfield is based in Hong Kong. So, raises a few questions, but I did hear from Crystal Smith, the CEO of the South Dakota Farm Bureau, that she's not focused on the bill. She's mainly focused on maintaining such a strong partnership that has served Sioux Falls for over 100 years.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And folks, stay tuned, because coming up next, we're talking about potholes and winter. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back, folks. It's officially pothole season. The frequent switch of warm and cold weather means more are popping up around South Dakota. Sydney Hoyer talks with a city crew and roadside assistants about how this weather is affecting their jobs.
February weather can range from snow to temps in the 60s. For Sioux Falls city workers, this past week has been full of pothole repair instead of snow removal.
We get a list from our logistics specialist. She tells us how many we have, and we've got the town broke up into 4 areas: northeast, southwest.
Many of those potholes are reported to the city by drivers.
They can get on the website and report them. Usually it takes us, I think we're 1.3 days to get one fixed after it's been reported.
But before they're fixed, potholes can cause a lot of issues for cars. AAA has responded to over 300 tire-related calls so far this year.
Very damaging to vehicles, from your tires to struts, shocks. Different elements of your vehicle can be damaged if you hit a pothole very hard.
Aside from fixing the potholes, damage can be avoided by watching out for them when driving.
The best way to do that is to really be scanning the road. Leave extra space between you and the vehicle in front of you so you can see a pothole in time and react.
As temperatures drop later this week, more potholes are likely to appear.
With the weather now dipping down to where it's going to get a little cooler, we may see a few more. But like I said, we'll just add crews as the numbers start creeping up.
All right, and Sydney joins us now. Sydney, you mentioned it a little bit in your story, but let's talk about some of the best advice for drivers when it comes to avoiding potholes, or if you can't avoid potholes, avoiding damage.
Yeah, so when you're driving, just looking out for those, especially if you've got plenty of space in front of you and you can kind of see the road, looking out for those, avoiding them as best you can, but don't, swerve into traffic, of course, if that's the only other option. Slowing down when you go over them can help with that as well. And then if you do have someone driving in front of you, leave enough space between both of you so you can maybe have a better chance of seeing that pothole before you might hit it.
Yeah, and talk to me a little bit about the stats we're seeing. I know you mentioned a few in your story, but when it comes to potholes and tire-related incidents here in South Dakota right now.
Yeah, so AAA in South Dakota has received over 300 calls. I think it's 330 tire-related calls since just January now, so in less than 2 months here. And a good portion of those do have to do with potholes. Some of them also have to do with, lower tire pressure, but a lot of times when that happens to your tires, hitting a pothole becomes a lot worse. So those can just cause a lot of tire issues for people.
Yeah, and in case someone missed it in your story, how can people report potholes if they want the city to fix them in their neighborhood?
Yeah, so there's a website for Sioux Falls at least. You go on there. It's linked actually in this story on our website. And you just click that link and you fill it out. You let them know where it's at. And like you said, between just 1 and 2 days later, as long as, the weather permits and all of that kind of thing, they will get that pothole fixed.
Perfect. Quick question before we wrap up here. Did you have to avoid any potholes on your way to work today?
I did not, thankfully. I did not.
Alrighty. Well, folks, what I'm going to do here quick, I don't trust that I actually have it in. Never mind. But if you go to our website, KELOLAND.com, you're going to have a link to Sydney's story. It's going to have how you can report potholes, at least for the city of Sioux Falls. And Sydney, thank you so much for joining us. And folks, remember, Sydney mentioned colder weather is still ahead. Well, we're going to be checking in with our meteorologists after the break with more details. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Inside the Newsroom. Welcome back, folks. To wrap up the show, we're going to talk about something some people are going to have mixed feelings on. It's snow. I know it's February, but these last few days have felt more really like April. Now, KELOLAND meteorologists Scott Munt and Brian Carsons have a look at snow totals so far this year and what it means for the state.
Today marks the 5th time Sioux Falls has had a high temperature at least 60 degrees in February. While Sioux Falls has had 5 days in February with 60-degree heat before, it has never happened in consecutive days until now. In fact, when I looked back at the weather stats for this snow season, it seems as if we've had a little more than 4 weeks of cold and snow. We started with above average snow in eastern KELOLAND for November and December. Since then, it's been silent. This graphic shows the amount of snow for November and December compared to average. Sioux Falls and Aberdeen were well above, while Pierre fell just short of average and Rapid City only had about a third of average. The January and February numbers have been far less, with amounts around a quarter to a third of the averages. And here's where I stand so far this season on my snowfall prediction. Sioux Falls is at 22.8, almost 3/4 of my prediction of 31.5. Aberdeen has a little more at 24.4 inches. That's 15.4 inches shy of my prediction. Even though it took a while for Pierre to get their first measurable snow this season, the capital is almost 50% of the way there. And wouldn't you know it, the city I forecast the most for has the least. Rapid City only has 7.7 of my 42.2. We'll see how much we add to these numbers over the next couple of days as snow is back in the forecast.
All right, so we just heard from meteorologist Scott Munt. Brian joins us now. Brian, we just heard from him about the snow totals this year. I want to get your take on things, especially like I mentioned before. It's feeling more like spring these last few days.
Yeah, we've gotten used to it now. How many days in a row? At least 5 of 60-degree weather in Sioux Falls. It's been amazing, but today the weather has really changed. I noticed in that piece that Scott did too, he's talking about Aberdeen snow totals, and today we have been adding to that. The math as we speak is changing, and the snow maps reflect that. One thing I would say too, as we get into month of March, which is just right around the corner here, math can change awfully quickly. He's sitting in pretty good shape actually for Sioux Falls. There were a lot of people at the beginning that thought, oh, it's going to be such a snowy winter and we'll end up with these huge numbers. And then we have been sitting for the longest time on very little change in Sioux Falls, and we're not getting any snow out of this system today. We'll see about tomorrow and Friday, a little bit of snow on the way. But ultimately, we do need some of it to calm down these fire weather problems, and that's been a big story.
Yeah, well, let's touch on why snow is so important and, like you mentioned, some of those dangers of too little snow and what people could see this summer?
Well, yeah, and expand the conversation out a little bit. So the Black Hills, for one thing, we've had fires this week. We know that we need to, get that situation in better shape. And one quick way to do that, get a blanket of snow. And so we're going to see that. Ultimately, too, the drought monitor, which feeds into kind of that bigger picture. I know this is a map that we show often, just giving us kind of the bird's eye view of how things are going. And we are in a situation where, on days where it's been dry and windy, our fire danger ramps right up there. That's going to come hand in hand with just the time of the year, too. The lack of snow and the old dormant grasses, very flammable. And so until we see some structural changes to the pattern, we're not going to see any major changes to this drought monitor. Even with the system coming in tomorrow in Nebraska, here, Joey, we're looking at still, look at Nebraska's drought monitor. It's pretty significant. It goes all the way back toward Denver. These fire weather concerns, we might get some temporary relief on that, but it's not probably a long-lasting thing.
Yeah, well, and it's nearing the end of February. Is there enough time to get some snow to maybe lessen those dangers when it comes to droughts, when it comes to fire season? I know I grew up in South Dakota, so I'm not used to seeing a fire season here. I just came from Montana, and I'm used to fire season, so I know what's going on, the dangers, that type of thing.
Yeah, in Montana, you look at, how situations have changed, and up there, too, a lot of fire weather concerns. But even for much of the plains, not just locally, but even down into Texas and Oklahoma, there's quite a bit of drought in those spots. I do think, yes, there's plenty of time on the clock here. We just have to erupt into a more active pattern. And some people will argue, well, we'd like to just get some plain rain with that. And I can't argue with that, but we're obviously not into the growing season. We got a long ways to go before we get to that point. So ultimately, put a little subsoil moisture back in the soil profile once we work out all the frost in the ground. That would be important to watch. And certainly these March and April systems, they can tilt things quickly. I've worked here long enough to see that over the years. So we're kind of in a holding pattern right now. No major storms other than what we're going to catch tomorrow in Nebraska, northwest Iowa. But next week or two, at least for now, it doesn't look like a huge amount of water with these systems.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us and providing us a little insight to snow here in South Dakota. Folks, that is all the time we have for today on Inside the Newsroom. You can catch Inside the Newsroom weekdays at 1 and 3 p.m. here on KELOLAND Plus. Until next time, have a great day.